You're listening to the Educate, Enable and Empower Show, a podcast from the Scottish Women's Development Forum, in which we sit down with inspiring women and others to listen to their stories, life lessons and perspectives. My name is Jenny Stewart, and I'm chair of the Scottish Women's Development Forum. In this podcast, Joanne McEwen and I sit down with Deputy Chief Constable Designate Jane Connors. Welcome to Breaking Barriers, a special episode in honour of International Women's Day, where we're embracing the theme of inspiring inclusion. Today, we're joined by Deputy Chief Constable Designate Jane Connors, LVO and QPM. Ma'am, you hold over 30 years of policing experience, drawn from a range of nationally significant command functions. You joined the Police Service of Scotland last year in 2023 with executive responsibility for crime and operational support. Within your portfolio, you hold responsibility for major crime, public protection, local crime, organised crime, counter-terrorism, intelligence and operational support. Having joined the Metropolitan Police Service in 1993, you started your career in East London, working across different communities before moving to Westminster to run the proactive crime teams. You've been head of both task force and public order planning commands. You are one of the most experienced public order cadre officers nationally, successfully delivering a significant number of complex and challenging events, many on the national and international stage. You've previously held oversight of control rooms, responding to urgent and non-urgent calls from the public, as well as working in local policing and neighbourhoods, leading on violence reduction. As Deputy Assistant Commissioner, you were responsible for leading on organisational improvement, COVID, stop and search, and coordinated the Metropolitan Police response to violence against women and girls, an area which you now lead on for Police Scotland. DCC Connors, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Ma'am, what an impressive bio. Your journey through policing is both inspiring and pioneering, transitioning from roles within the Metropolitan Police Service to your current position in Police Scotland. You've not only navigated but also led through significant changes. Can you let us know what drew you into a career in policing?
So I initially went down to London. I was actually from Manchester. So if you hear a slight twang in my voice, that's where it'll be from. And I went down to London and I worked for a public relations company. I'm not good at 9 to 5. I'm not good at the routine. And I saw on the tube an advert for the Metropolitan Police. Really fancied joining. And as I say, applied, got in and started my career down in London with the Met.
And never looked back?
Never looked back. Amazing.
And did you know anybody in the police? Was there a family history or was there somebody, a role model, if you like, that led you into that?
No policing contacts whatsoever. I didn't have a flat in London. I literally packed my bags, went down and then joined the police.
Incredible. And once you joined the police in 1993, really different, I think, from what policing is like now. And we'll talk more later about diversity and what that looked like. How did that feel, a young woman in policing? And were there role models that you had within the job once you got there?
I think looking back now as I can with kind of 30 years, when I first joined, there was like 2 females on the team and that was it. Very misogynistic, you're there to make the tea. I mean, this was still back in the days when you got issued a skirt, you got issued a truncheon that was the size of a toothpick. You had no equality whatsoever. So looking back now, I can see the changes. But at the time, it was really isolating because you wanted to make a difference. You wanted to join the police and you had all these visions of how it would be. And, the kind of advertising sells this job. But actually, when I actually went onto team and joined it, I did find it very isolating because you have to draw on kind of friends who are outside the job for support, but they don't understand the job that you do. So yeah, it was very isolating when I joined.
And it's interesting how certainly, with our members might share that view even now, all these years later. And I think that's the importance of the SWDF. But I think it's also the importance of women in leadership. How important do you think it is to see people like you at executive level in the service?
I think it is really, really important. So as I moved through the job and I got different promotions, it was actually when I started to look around and wanted people to talk to. But there were very few senior female leaders in particular. When I got into the Public Order Command, and that was in about 2015, so I'd been in the job a very long time. But that's, again, very male-dominated. But there was a female chief superintendent. I was a chief inspector at the time. There was a female chief superintendent in the Public Order Command. She was hugely supportive. She came out to talk to people. You know, she just made you feel as if you could do what she was doing. So that role model and being able to have people that you can connect with, it really is hugely important. It certainly encouraged me to think, well, she can do it, therefore I can do it. So that's how it worked for me.
I think that's a really important and interesting message, particularly in that public order space that might have been traditionally seen to be, you know, for male colleagues, but actually, as you say, if you see it, you feel you can be it, and seeing huge progress in that. Thank you.
Just before we go a little bit more into your leadership journey, whilst I was doing my homework on you, my research for this podcast, but I noticed one of your honours. You're a QPM, but you're also an LVO. Now, I had to look this one up. You're a Lieutenant of the Victorian Order, an LVO. So this is an honour founded by Queen Victoria in 1896, and we have it here on the desk with us, which is absolutely stunning. And apparently all awards are bestowed as part of this order are given at the discretion of the sovereign. Can you tell me a little bit more about this?
Yeah, no, I have to be honest, it was a huge honour, really was. So I was in charge of the Queen's funeral, so Operation London Bridge in London. I'd been working on it for about 6 years. Initially I was silver, and then I took over the role of gold. So the person who was sitting in London delivering that whole event over all of those days, that was me. And in recognition of that, it was bestowed by the King to thank me, in effect, for the work that I'd done for the Sovereign's funeral. So, yeah, a very special event and a very special award.
I worked up here on Operation Unicorns. That was seeing the Queen down back home to her resting place, and I watched they were all standing round her coffin, and it was a really, really pivotal moment, I think, for a lot of people, because that's all we had known was, as our sovereign, was the Queen. What an honour to have that bestowed upon you, but really, really interesting for me to find out more about it.
And it was a very, as you say, the monarch is there, but that personal connection, when we were told that she'd actually passed, there was a kind of moment everybody stopped to realise the reality of it. But I'd worked with Police Scotland colleagues for a number of years, having been in London, and I was watching the most beautiful scenery, the most incredible operation that Police Scotland was putting on. And I was conscious that I was in London with tower blocks and it was going to come down. So, yeah, a huge honour, but working really closely with Police Scotland, and what an amazing, amazing event Police Scotland did as well.
So looking back over your 30 plus years of service, what are some of those significant milestones in your career that could be described as, I suppose, turning points or that fork in the road? Now, that could be challenges, or like the film Sliding Doors, a moment which led you down a different path.
I think there's always moments, and it's only when you look back and reflect. But I think one of kind of the most unpleasant moments that probably shaped quite a lot of what I was. So I joined the Metropolitan Police. I moved into East London to one of the boroughs. I'd come from Manchester. I'd been at Durham University. I had no real experience of kind of a really diverse London borough. I just didn't. And the team that I was on, whilst they were very supportive, they were very traditional cops. And as I say, we're going back a number of years now, 30 years. But we went to pick up somebody who was an overstay from prison. It was their daughter's birthday, and they were only slightly late, and they should have returned, and they didn't. So we went to get them. And actually, the way that the officers spoke to this guy, I just thought it was unnecessary. Yeah, he was late, but actually, do you know what? You could understand why. And I remember speaking to the officers afterwards, just saying, well, was that necessary? You didn't have to do that. But little did I know at the time, it wasn't my place as a brand new probationer and a female to even dare to challenge some of these officers who were long in service, had been on the team for a long time, were area car drivers. And anybody that's got a level of service will know, area car drivers were kind of the thing. I didn't think any more of it until people started to kind of ostracise me, didn't speak to me. I started to be put out on patrol on my own on a night duty. And again, going back, you just had your little Storno radio, you didn't have your airwave buttons. And there came a point where I actually had to go to a burglary. The doors were open on my own, middle of the night, go in and check the premises. And I thought, do you know what? This is not good, because you're actually kind of putting my safety in danger. And if I called for urgent assistance, which is the call you put out when you want people to come to your help, would people come? And that was the point at which I realised that the dynamic on the team was really not good. And I was deliberately being put in that position. I was lucky because my now husband was around at the time, very supportive. He'd been in the police as a special. He was an East Ender from London. So he kind of got it more, and he was very supportive. But actually I had to take the choice then to leave the team because I knew they were not going to support me. Moved to a new team and didn't speak for nearly 6 months. There were people on that team who were really kind, very supportive. And slowly but surely I got my confidence back. I started to speak. The team were great. And I haven't looked back from that moment. But people left notes in my tray. I could never find my kit. All of these things that are juvenile but really, really undermine you. So having moved on to this new team, they weren't overtly supportive, but they were kind. They gave me the space to just, take my role. And I remember as I started to kind of be the person who I wanted to be in the police, one of the people said to me, that's the first time in 6 months you haven't really spoken. So I could see that I was sort of starting to develop. And I've never looked back, but that kind of forged a determination in me, which was I will never be somebody who's allowed to kind of just be put in a corner or told, don't speak. I will always be somebody who's going to fight back at the team, challenge them. And I've never allowed anybody to kind of get in my way in the future. I don't shout, I don't scream, but I'm really determined to change attitudes. So I think that's probably a really defining moment very early in service where I had two choices. I could dig in or I could leave. So I dug in.
And it's good for us and everybody in policing, I think, that you did. I think that is such a great example of when your voice can be minimised in an environment. And we talk a lot, and it can happen to anybody, I think it's important to say, but we talk a lot about women and confidence. And I've always believed that women have got confidence in abundance, but the environment can take that away sometimes. It's interesting as well because it feels to me that really speaks to your values. When you spoke about the gentleman, the oversteer, and that approach. Tell us a little bit about your values. What's important to you and why are they important?
So I think exactly as you say, values are what drives you. It's deep inside you and it doesn't matter kind of what's going on around you. That's where you come back to and you pull on to make sure that you're reflecting it. And those values, I mean, you've got the Police Scotland values, and I think actually they're, integrity, fairness, respect, they're inbuilt values to me as well. But I really value courage as well. And I've got some tattoos. I class it as my midlife crisis, I'm not going to lie. So I have got some tattoos. The first one I got is the Chinese symbol for courage. And that's not just professional life, but that's personal life. It's where do you dig in? Where do you keep going and support others, but keep driving forwards? And one of the other things I've got on my arm is part of the Man in the Arena speech, which I believe was Teddy Roosevelt when he was NYPD commissioner. And it basically says, you do your best, you get out there, you try. Don't be somebody who hides in the shadows and doesn't try and then criticises everybody else who does that. So I think my value is exactly that, that fairness, that respect, that wanting to be honest all the time. But I think courage is something that's there as well. And those, whatever you do the right thing and you have an honest conversation, and it might be uncomfortable, but can I go and sleep at night? Yes, because I feel like I've done the right thing.
And that's when you know, isn't it, that, you know, as you say, you can sleep at night. You've done what is in line with your values. But that can't always be easy. And I imagine in a career as long as yours and in the executive leadership roles, the command roles that you've had, there will have been challenges along the way. I'm interested, what sustains you? So you spoke about your friends outside of police. You mentioned your husband. What is it that, you know, allows you to keep going, maybe at times when things are difficult or you're facing challenges?
I think the support network that we all need. And as you say, I've got a brilliant family. I've got my husband, my daughter. You know, I've still got both my parents, my brothers, and friends that I've had for a long, long time. They're your support network. Who do I go and talk to and just have a rant when it's all too much? Who do you go and kind of let off steam with? But having that kind of network internally as well, people who share those experiences and will have the empathy, I think that's always been really, really important to me. You know, some of the public order events that I've done, when you're sitting in the Gold Suite, you're on your own, you feel like everything is sitting on your shoulders. And I remember one event, Lucy Dorsey, who's now the Chief Constable of the BTP, she came in with a cup of coffee and a chocolate bar, sat, just had a normal conversation, and off she went. But that support that she brought into that. So that ability as a senior leader to never forget that I need to talk to people and I need to be able to go and have those discussions, that's really important. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how senior you are. There will be plenty of times when I'm not sure and I need to be able to go and say to somebody, I'm not sure about this. Having brave conversations, really grown up, professional conversations, you've got to be able to challenge. And I think that's where the courage comes in as well, because you do the challenge in the right way, but you need to be able to have that voice. And for me, that's really important.
I suppose values, and you talk a little bit there about leadership. So moving on to your leadership style, you know, we always think of policing as that command and control. And that can really influence an organisation's culture. And we've seen some of the output of that command and control culture that we're seeing. We talk about diversity and inclusion. But how would you describe your approach to leadership and how has it evolved over your 30-year career?
Yeah, I think looking back, it's always great to look back and reflect. And I would encourage people at any point to just stop and look back and think, I've achieved that, or I did that, and I didn't think. So that reflection's really important. And I think kind of watching back over my leadership journey as I gained in confidence to be who I was in my own individual and not trying to be something that fitted what I thought people thought I should be, I started to find leadership a lot easier because you're much more natural, you're much more open, you're much more honest. But that takes time to gain that confidence. A lot of the time, especially when you take your first promotions as a sergeant, as an inspector, you've got to maybe you're friendly with people, but you're not their friend. At some point, you might have to say to them, what you're doing is not right, or where do you need support? So being able to evolve through that journey. But the more confident you get in your leadership style, I think is where you then start to enjoy leadership as well. You can see other people responding to you. But I think the main thing is remembering is humility. We serve the public, and I need to be able to work with people. And it's a team effort. And I think for me, remembering that and staying humble, that keeps hopefully my leadership kind of authentic in what it is.
Thank you. We're going to change and talk a little bit about culture now, a space that is, I think everyone would agree, has been a challenge for policing in general. And we know that last year, our former Chief Constable, Sir Ian Livingston, made a statement about institutional discrimination. So really key for yourself and other members of the executive team. Tell us about how you and your role are working to transform that culture.
So I think there's two parts to it. One is that visible role model. And I've talked about how I looked around and thought there's people there who are doing what I want to do and being able to do that bit. And I think the other bit is also being able to create the space. And I talked about humility, but it's being able to have different discussions with different people. I get that it can be really hard sometimes because people worry about phraseology. They worry about saying the right thing. And actually sometimes I think that inhibits a discussion. And I think sometimes certainly in recent years, when you see what's happening in policing, and I would say to people, don't be constrained. If you're honest and you're trying to talk to somebody about something, then have some courage to speak up. I remember when I had a reverse mentor when I was in the Met, and she was a black inspector who lived in London, and I was talking to her about stop and search. And actually she pointed out to me that she's got a 10-year-old son that she had to sit down and explain to him and talk to him about how he interacts with the police during a stop and search in London, because she knew that he would at some point come into that. And that completely changed my frame of reference, because I thought, I would never have thought about that. I would never have seen it. I would never have understood it. So being able to create those discussions, create space where you can have conversations with people about their experiences, their lives and the impact it has on them. I think those are the things for me that are very important. And that's what we need to be able to do. And that's what I'm doing as part of the organisation. You know, we do truth to power, but do we talk to each other in a way that allows people to talk about who they are, what they are? I think that's the bit I want to see much more.
Yeah, I think it's those everyday conversations almost. Like you say, and there's so many people diverse and unique in the organisation. But I think you make a really interesting point about language literacy, talking about matters of diversity. And I always think personally that if it comes from a good place, it can never really be wrong, and it can inhibit. So diversity really important. What works do you think in terms of trying to increase that diversity within the organisation?
I think it's about showing that we are open to different discussions, creating an environment that people could come in and bring themselves, but also knowing that people will be supported, whoever it is that comes through. But that ability to show that we are visibly different and we value it. Being a trailblazer or somebody who's coming into an organisation and you're one of the first or you're one of a few, that's really hard. So being able to support that and make sure that people can come forward if they're not comfortable. So there's many things to it, but that's one of the main things is encouraging people, be brave, come and join the police and make a difference. That's very easy for me to say, and it can be really hard to do. But being able to do that is key.
I think you're right. And coming in, as you say, being a trailblazer can be a big weight on the shoulders there. And it can already be a challenge for somebody coming into the organisation. I think that's where the SWDF and networks like that have got a really important role to play, supporting our members who might find themselves in that situation.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's that, we call it a network, which is such a technical term, but it is who can I go and talk to? Might not be of rank or anything, but actually the associations, especially, as you say, are really, really important. And also asking people, what do you want? What would you like? What would work for you? I think policing, sometimes senior officers were very good to say, right, we're going to do this and we're going to charge that hill and we're going to put this here. And actually somebody goes, but that's not what we want and that's not what we need. So being able to understand exactly what's needed and then work on that, that's really important.
It's that diversity of perspective or thought that we really need to tap into. And I know Joanne had asked you about Sirian's statement about institutional discrimination. And for us as a diversity staff association, you know, when he made that statement, it was like a moment, a pivotal moment for us. But I know a lot of people who also didn't agree with that statement. So we're going in a bit of we've got a cultural transformation going on in policing. It's like something we have never seen the like of before, really. And it's no small feat, especially for something the size of our organisation at 22,000 of a workforce. What's important to you to get right, and what does good look like?
Very challenging questions, and quite rightly. I think the institutional discrimination was such an important point, and I think some people don't realise how important it was, because it was more than just a statement. It was a direction, it was this is where we're going, but also, for me, it was a bit of freedom, because a lot of people have spent 1,000 different ways in trying to explain why we are not institutionally discriminatory. And you can, when you're trying to explain something that actually you don't really believe, it's really hard. So being able to actually have that, identify the problem, then enables you to have the discussions to move forward. And I know a lot of people didn't agree with it. I think some of the narrative around how it was explained to people, we're not calling individuals racist, but we are saying our systems and processes and the way things have evolved over time, they don't deliver the right services to the people that they need to deliver. So understanding what's behind it, but also what it did was free up people to have those discussions. I think my frustration sometimes is, oh, it's not on my team. It doesn't happen in my area. That's the kind of mentality in terms of transformation that we really need to be able to change, which is, are you really sure that that's the case? And I've, come up from the Met, and Louise Casey's report made it really clear. And I reflected back and thought, was I somebody who thought, no, it's okay. Oh, it goes on in areas. So that's the big challenge for me in a big transformation when you're doing a cultural change. There are absolutely people who are on board and they're leading from the front. There are people who are, starting to get it. But the people who think, doesn't happen on my watch, it doesn't exist in Police Scotland, it does, and we need to be able to change it and have those discussions. So that's where the challenge is. It's getting everybody to understand.
Yeah, and it's about our future together. And I think just moving on to future vision and impact as we look towards the future and consider the theme of inspiring inclusion for International Women's Day in 2024, I'd like us to touch on the critical issues of violence against women and girls, and that's something that you have led on in the Metropolitan Police and continue to do so in Police Scotland. Could you share how Police Scotland is addressing the issue and what initiatives you're particularly passionate about in the fight against violence on women and girls, because it's something you have led?
Yeah, I think violence against women and girls, often initiatives come from tragedy and then they gain momentum. And I think some of my frustration is that that's what it takes sometimes, to get campaigns that have been going on for many, many, many years to kind of get the visibility. But yeah, the violence against women and girls, I think the thing about it for me, especially in Police Scotland, is the different elements that it has. So it has the internal culture piece, and we've talked about some of that, because how we behave in the police and how we treat the public, that reflects out. So that's really, really important. This isn't about externals. I think the other bit is around being able to work with different stakeholders, particularly the third sector, the women's aid, rape crisis, and being able to engage with those different partners who really tell us what's going on. Again, saying, oh, we're doing this, we're doing that. I think we're very good at putting a lot of activities out there, but actually, are they the right activities? And are we doing them in the right places and in the right way? So working with our particularly our third sector people who absolutely hold our feet to the fire quite rightly about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then there's many other areas where we're working particularly in high harm spaces. So victims in particular are areas where their voices are not heard, they're not able to come forwards, and how are we managing the risk to those individuals and supporting them? And then there's a big cultural piece in the public space. That guy actually taking the message to the people it needs to be taken to. Violence against women and girls, it's not for women and girls to change their behaviour, it's for society to change its behaviour. So I think that's the energy that I really get from the violence against women and girls, is the different areas it has in it. Everybody has a part to play in it, and then being able to drive it forwards. And I think the measures is really interesting, because police, we tend to be quite transactional. So have detection rates gone up and down? Have crime rates gone up or down? But what really matters is, are we making a difference to how people feel? Victims, survivors, people who are frightened to report, people who just want to go out and enjoy their day or enjoy their evening and not have to worry. That's the piece that's particularly important for me. So success looks like a societal change, which is a very grand statement, but we are part of that. But more importantly, victims and survivors and other people giving feedback that says, yeah, I feel safe and I feel like listened to, and then we get the justice for them.
And, you know, the SWDF have worked in partnership with some charities focused particularly on violence against women and girls. In fact, the profits from our photography project went to just one of those. And it was really interesting what you said about, you know, some of the learning there for police, because, you know, we don't always get that right. But learning and listening to that lived experience of survivors or relatives of people who didn't survive is so, so key. In fact, Joanne and I were listening to the Reverend Smallman. She came up for an opening of Black History Month, and I have to say I was completely blown away by her, what had happened to her and her daughters, of course, with and that was down in the Met. But she gave us a challenge in Police Scotland. She said, I'm coming back in a year and I want to see an improvement. And I thought to myself, you know, this woman has been through the most devastating loss. She'd lost both of her daughters, but she's doing that learning process. You know, she's coming back in a year to see how we're getting on. So it is a space where I believe, not just as a police officer, but as a woman, that we can improve so much more. And I'm so glad that, you know, you feel the same way as well. So I suppose some of the impact of these initiatives in the broader community, again, it's a bit of a future question. How inclusive and a safe a society we're trying to create. How do you see that going in the next 5 to 10 years then within Scotland and indeed the UK?
So I think if you look at how Scotland in particular, and having come from the UK, it's probably not noticeable to people in Scotland, but it is to me. The friendliness, the sense of community, the sense of joining together. And Scotland's a huge country, but actually it's a village because people do know each other and they talk to each other. So, you know, my colleagues down south will no doubt be phoning me up saying, I can't believe you said that. But actually, the warmth and that community sense that you do get in Scotland, I think that stands in really good stead to build forwards. I have huge hope for the generations that are coming through at the moment. Much more inclusive, much more able to have discussions. You know, look back over 30 years of policing coming in now. So I have real hopes that society is starting to look at difficult topics, willing to have difficult discussions. And therefore, things like violence against women and girls, you know, junior school, secondary school, people are being taught about what's acceptable behaviour. And this is about young boys, young men. So for me, I have a real hope. And I think in Scotland in particular, that wellbeing duty that's written into policing, that sense of community and that sense of kind of societal wellbeing, I think that means that there will be changes as we go forward.
Yeah. There's a shift. You spoke about the societal piece. I think that's important. And there's a real shift with the current generation, I think, and it's going to be so interesting to see what the future looks like for them. I wanted to ask you in relation to VOG and that internal and external, a lot of our focus can be on women and girls, but actually in SWDF, we've been really trying to focus on allyship, male colleagues, what they bring. How important is that to you?
I think it's really, really important. I'm going to be a bit controversial. As long as it's genuine, you know, absolutely people will. We've all seen people, different people stand up either in the media or people that we talk to, and you can tell whether something's genuine. You can tell whether their mindset has changed as a result of discussions that they've had. So allyship is really, really important, but it needs to be somebody who's found out about it, thought about it, and can actually speak from the heart about supporting it. So it is really, really important, but it's something that people need to invest energy into. You don't just wake up one morning and think, oh, I'm going to be an ally. You have to invest into it. But it is really important, and I hope that more people will invest into being allies around it.
Yeah, and having those conversations, getting involved, and we're seeing that increasingly across the staff associations, aren't we?
Yeah, and when you have the power of an ally, it is amazing what you can achieve as opposed to someone who is, you know, dare I say it, but it's that tick box exercise. That's not who we want as allies. We want people who really lift people from underrepresented groups up. And I count myself as an ally as well in many spaces. And it's important for me to give voice to those who are, we talk about the wheel of privilege. That's, we have talked about that before. And I know that I sit on the wheel of privilege. I know exactly where I sit on that. And there are groups who need me to champion them as well. So I suppose it's just having that perspective for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And be curious. Be curious comes back to if you've got questions or you're curious about something, if it comes from the right place and if you haven't got the right terminology, ask, is this the right terminology? And just generate that conversation and be brave and curious about having it.
Courageous and curious. I think that's what I'm going to take away from today. DCC, your journey and insights have been incredible. Thank you for sharing your experiences and passions over a career that's spanned over 30 years.
To our listeners, let's take today's conversation as a call to action. Reflect on the importance of diversity and inclusion in leadership, support and promote initiatives that empower women in leadership positions. Together, we can make a difference, not just on International Women's Day, but every day.
Thank you for tuning in to Breaking Barriers. Join us next time as we continue to share stories that challenge the status quo and inspire change.
This has been a TwaBoldLassies production for the Scottish Women's Development Forum.